What if I told you that one man's ability to charm his way into Syria's elite circles led to intelligence so valuable that it changed the course of Middle Eastern history? That a single spy became so trusted by Syria's top military leaders that they considered making him the Deputy Minister of Defense, all while secretly working for Israel's Mossad. This is the incredible true story of Eli Cohen, the spy who became known as Israel's greatest intelligence asset and whose work continues to save lives even decades after his death. In 1961, the Syrian military controlled the strategic Golan Heights, using the elevated position to rain artillery fire down on Israeli villages below. Israel desperately needed intelligence about Syria's military plans and fortifications, but penetrating Syria's tight-knit leadership circle seemed impossible until Eli Cohen entered the picture. Born in Alexandria, Egypt, to Syrian Jewish parents, Cohen was a natural with languages, speaking Arabic, French, English, and Hebrew fluently. But more importantly, he possessed an extraordinary gift, the ability to make anyone trust him completely. This gift would transform him into Israel's most effective spy and ultimately lead to his tragic downfall. But how did a humble filing clerk become the toast of Damascus society? The transformation began in 1961 when Cohen was recruited by Mossad. His mission seemed suicidal: establish himself in Syria's high society and infiltrate the highest levels of its military and government. The stakes? Nothing less than Israel's survival. Cohen's handlers created an elaborate backstory. He would pose as Kamal Amin Tharbet, a wealthy Syrian businessman returning from Argentina to invest in his homeland. For months they drilled him in Syrian culture, customs and dialect until he could pass as a native-born Syrian. The spy game is patience. So Cohen began his mission not in Syria, but in Buenos Aires, Argentina. There, he carefully cultivated relationships with Syrian diplomats and businessmen. He threw lavish parties, always picking up the check. He demonstrated his patriotism by donating generously to Syrian causes. Slowly but surely, Kamal Tharbet became known as a wealthy patriot eager to help Syria prosper. By 1962, Cohen had earned enough trust to move to Damascus. This is where his incredible talent for manipulation truly shined. He rented a luxury apartment across from Syrian military headquarters and began hosting legendary parties. These weren't just any parties. They were legendary affairs where alcohol flowed freely and beautiful women were always in attendance. Syria's top military officers and government officials couldn't resist. They came for the parties, but stayed for Cohen's magnetic personality. He was charming, intelligent, and most importantly, he listened. In a culture where information was power, Cohen became everyone's confidant. Think about this for a moment. Here was a man who had Syrian generals drunkenly spilling military secrets in his living room, all while a hidden radio transmitter sent every word back to Israel. But Cohen went even further. He convinced his new friends to take him on tours of Syria's most sensitive military installations. One of his most brilliant moves came when he expressed concern about Syrian soldiers suffering under the hot sun. Being the generous patriot everyone believed him to be, he suggested planting eucalyptus trees at military positions to provide shade. These trees became perfect targeting markers for Israeli artillery years later during the Six-Day War. But Cohen's greatest achievement was becoming a trusted advisor to Syria's top military brass. He was consulted on military plans, invited to closed-door meetings, and even accompanied officials on secret inspections of fortifications. Every detail, every conversation, every blueprint made its way back to Israel. His intelligence was so valuable that it said Israeli Prime Minister Levi Eshkol would interrupt cabinet meetings to read Cohen's reports. The information he provided was unprecedented. Detailed maps of Syrian bunkers, lists of arms shipments, warnings of planned attacks, and insights into the Syrian leadership's thinking. But in the world of espionage, success often carries the seeds of its own destruction. Cohen's meteoric rise in Damascus society, his seemingly unlimited wealth, and his constant presence at sensitive sites eventually raised suspicions. Syrian counterintelligence began to notice that Israeli military actions seemed to anticipate their plans with uncanny accuracy. In January 1965, newly acquired Soviet technology detected Cohen's radio transmissions. Syrian security forces raided his apartment while he was in the middle of sending a message to Israel. The charming businessman Kamel Tharbet was exposed as Eli Cohen, Israeli spy. What followed was a show trial that shocked the world. Cohen was tortured but refused to break, never revealing the full extent of his operations or his contacts. Despite international appeals for mercy, including from Pope Paul VI, Syria refused to spare him. On May 18, 1965, Eli Cohen was publicly hanged in Damascus's Marjah Square. But death wasn't the end of Cohen's impact on history. The intelligence he gathered proved crucial during the Six-Day War in 1967. Israeli forces used his detailed maps and information to capture the Golan Heights in just 2 days, a victory that would have been impossible without his work. The human cost of Cohen's mission was devastating. He left behind a wife, Nadia, and 3 children, the youngest of whom was born while he was in Syria and never met his father. For years after his execution, Nadia fought to bring his remains back to Israel for burial, a quest that continues to this day. But what makes Eli Cohen's story truly remarkable isn't just his incredible success as a spy, it's the way he fundamentally changed the nature of intelligence gathering. His method of becoming not just an observer, but an influencer, someone who could shape events rather than just report them, became a model for modern espionage. Think about what Cohen achieved. In just 4 years, he rose from being a complete unknown to becoming one of the most trusted figures in Syria. He didn't just gather intelligence, he helped shape Syrian military policy. His suggestions about troop deployments and fortifications were actually implemented, effectively allowing Israel to help design the defenses it would later face. The questions his story raises are still relevant today. How do you protect against someone who can make everyone trust them completely? How do you maintain security when your enemies might be your closest friends? And perhaps most importantly, what drives someone to live a life of such complete deception, knowing that discovery means certain death? Cohen's legacy lives on in modern intelligence operations. His techniques for building trust and infiltrating hostile environments are still studied by intelligence agencies worldwide. The information he gathered continues to influence military planning in the region even today, more than 50 years after his death. But perhaps his greatest legacy is as a reminder of the human element in espionage. Beyond the gadgets, beyond the tradecraft, intelligence work ultimately comes down to people, their desires, their weaknesses, their humanities. Cohen understood this better than anyone. He didn't just pretend to be Kamel Tharbet, he became him, and in doing so, wrote himself into history. His story teaches us something profound about human nature, how our desire to trust, to belong, to be part of something greater than ourselves can be both our greatest strength and our most dangerous weakness. In the end, the same qualities that made Syria's leaders trust Cohen, his charm, his intelligence, his apparent sincerity, were real aspects of his personality, used in service of a cause he believed in deeply. Today, the full extent of Cohen's intelligence gathering may never be known. Some of his reports remain classified, and many of the secrets he uncovered are still relevant to modern military planning. But his impact is undeniable. The borders of Israel and Syria, the military balance in the Middle East, and the very nature of modern espionage all bear his fingerprints. In the shadowy world of espionage, where success often goes unrecognized, and failure means death, Eli Cohen stands out as someone whose impact was so profound it couldn't be kept secret. His story reminds us that sometimes the greatest victories in intelligence work come not from technology or force, but from understanding human nature and being willing to risk everything for what you believe in. Years after his death, when asked about Cohen, one of his Syrian friends, who never suspected his true identity, said, "He was the perfect man, intelligent, sophisticated, and generous. We all loved him." Perhaps that's the most remarkable thing about Eli Cohen. Even those he deceived couldn't help but admire him. As tensions continue to simmer in the Middle East, and as new technologies change the face of espionage, Eli Cohen's story remains powerfully relevant. It reminds us that in the end, intelligence work isn't about satellites or surveillance devices, it's about people. One person with enough courage, skill and dedication can change the course of history. The eucalyptus trees Cohen had planted to mark Syrian bunkers have long since been cut down. The Damascus apartment where he hosted his legendary parties has been demolished, but his influence remains, a testament to the power of human intelligence in an age of electronic surveillance. And somewhere in Damascus, in a grave whose location remains a secret, lies the body of a man who lived two lives, the charming socialite Kamel Thabet and the dedicated spy Eli Cohen. Both identities were real in their way, both part of a legacy that continues to shape the modern world. His story stands as a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are the ones that can never be publicly acknowledged, and that the truest heroes are often those whose names we'll never know. In the end, Eli Cohen wasn't just Mossad's greatest spy. He was a master of the art of human intelligence, whose work redefined what one person could achieve in the shadow world of espionage.